Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar for the rough transition to IATF 16949. We are going live in about 16 countries right now. We have more than 750 attendees joining this call. As we speak, there are more and more people joining in. Let me introduce the speaker for today, Mr. Chad Keimal. He is the Chief Technology Officer for Omnex Incorporate. He works out of the headquarters of Omnex in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a trusted name in the automotive quality arena. He has received many quality awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year by American Society of Quality. Chad has published many papers and is an author of 5 popular books on the subjects of management standards, quality systems, and auditing. His books on value-based auditing, integrated management systems, sustainability, and ISO 9001 is one of the best sellers available currently. Chad's primary focus is helping management teams worldwide in integrating and implementing systems and solutions that reduce risk, increase efficiency, enhance profitability. He has a particular passion to the improvement of new product development processes and risk mitigation strategies for product launches in the automotive industry. Let me welcome Mr. Chad Keimal to chair the session.
Welcome, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to be here in India, and I'm speaking to you from Omnex's Chennai office. I'm glad I'm be able to be with you today and share with you some of the third-party audit findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So let me fast forward here and go right to the agenda for today. And as I go through, I'm reminded of the global locations we have, and the ability to be able to do one-stop shopping globally, and to be able to help companies like Magna and Lear with 22 different training in languages globally. We go right to the agenda. So those of you here today are really in for a treat, in the sense that not only are you going to get the information and data we had as of April 2017, but it's been updated to include also the data from August 2018. Now let me tell you what that means in a second. So when we cover the agenda, we'll talk about the background. Very quickly we'll go through this because I find there just isn't enough time. Then we'll do an analysis of the total non-conformances and the majors. And we'll analyze things by clauses, and then we'll move quickly to the summary. Oh, there it is. This is what I was looking for. So not only will I share with you the initial results from 181 audits, I'm also going to give you the results from 3,172 audits as of the end of August, actually. So 3,172 audits. It's going to be interesting for us actually to compare the results from the first audits to the second set of audits. And as I'm here, I actually have a small crowd around here. And folks, make sure you ask me questions. You can ask me questions as I go along to make it more interesting for those listening in. All right. So this, of course, is of no surprise to you. You are very familiar with this. That's why I've joined this webinar. There's the IATF 16949 Automotive Quality System Requirements. And then, of course, it's just so happened this time, it's unfortunate, we have a second document, which is ISO 9001 2015. Of course, both of them put together are IATF 16949, but there's a lot of confusion out there. What is IATF 16949? Now, of course, we say IATF 16949 and ISO 9001 2015. Let me skip right to the bottom there. We have the customer specific requirements. So CSRs, which were important before, now even become that much more important. So we have to make sure the CSRs are taken into account. And as I see this, folks, this is a major non-conformance. CSR is a major non-conformance, and one of them is actually right here. The CSRs are not just for subscribing customers, they are for your total automotive business. I will mention that to you a little bit later, all right? It's a misapprehension I myself had talking to one of the writers of the IATF 16949, which got clarified, and very important for all of you as you implement that you consider the total automotive business. I'll give you an example and such that we give in the US to explain this. Of course, then you have the core tools that not only do your internal auditors have to have competency for, you have to implement it inside your system. Now, folks, we are, as of October 2nd, something very important. The time for ISO TS 16949 is over. All audits must be to IATF 16949 going forward. So things are in a groove. Now, based on your anniversary date, you have to get audited, and you have to get audited to IATF 16949. Of course, you could opt out, but then you will be having to do it on the next anniversary, which definitely will be after September 14th. There isn't a lot of dates anybody has. This is one of the biggest concerns coming out of the IATF, lack of flexibility and availability in the registrar pool to make, if somebody misses something, you're going to be hard put in terms of finding another dates. Folks, let's move right in then and take a look at the total non-conformances coming from the first 181 audits. And really, when we looked at this, this is too many, and we're going to focus on the 80%. And then we said 80% was 35 clauses. Sorry, let me say that again. You can see there are a total of 975 non-conformances. Well, that's too many. If you look at 975, we don't have focus. So what we did is we focused actually on the top 60%, which is what the circle is, at the top 35 of the total. Keep in mind, there is almost one major per audit. Are you all surprised? One major. It's actually 0.73. I'll round up because I want to make sure we all take the IATF 16949 very seriously. And then there's 5.38 non-conformances per audit. Now, this is the data out of 181 audits. 3,172 audits later, the number hasn't changed very much. It's still around 5.3. We'll say 5.3, and it was 5.38 before, okay? So the number of audits, non-conformances, imagine there are some companies doing well and some companies doing worse. So 35 NCs in this list of 60% of these, it's not just minors, this is actually a total non-conformance Pareto. What are the comments I want to make here? The reason we gave up the other 20%, 80%, is the last 20% was trailing and was kind of really low. It would have added another 30 non-conformances, okay? So, all right, let me go on. I'm actually going to mute here, giving you a chance to see if you have any questions you want to add. So when we look at this 35 NCs, it goes from total productive maintenance at the very top all the way to error proofing in the bottom, okay? There was a point we made here that the number of ISO 9001 clauses are very few. Only 3 in this list of 35. And we all know ISO 9001 changed in a major way. So what's going on? Will this trend hold when we analyze the major non-conformances. Let's hold on to that thought as we go forward. Oh, okay. I did do some analysis here in color coding it. So here are the 3 ISO 9001 clauses. And then we said, you know, I looked at this in a different way. Because when Omnex did the gap analysis, we gave a number of non-conformances to clauses that really didn't change much, like competence. So competence is receiving non-conformances as part of the top 35, and also control of documented information is receiving. I can just say this, when Omnex did the gap analysis, we gave a lot more non-conformances to existing clauses that didn't change. All right, so those are the points to be made there. Let's move on. This then, folks, is the top 10 total non-conformances. Total productive maintenance is one of the top ones, followed by control plan. So total productive maintenance shows up again in the major non-conformances, and I'm going to cover that later. Folks, one of the things I do know, because I've done this webinar a couple of times, you want me to add explanations. I'm going to save the explanations that I'm going to add to the major non-conformances versus the minors. I'll just say this, majors we don't really want to have. Minors are not good, but they're easily fixed. I'll just say this, let's go to the control plan. The key part of this control plan is 2 items in the control plan. One is the linkage between the DFMEA, process flow, PFMEA, and control plan. And I'll just say this plain and simple. If you want to have linkages, you need to have software. There's just no other way to do that. And the second part of this 8.5.1.1 is that the control plan needs to get reviewed for a number of events, including product changes, manufacturing process, logistics, measurement, customer complaints, corrective action, many different items. And those 2 items are, in my belief, the reason why it's at the very top. Contingency plan shows up, and it shows up again in the major non-conformances. So let me hold off. And we do see 851, control of production and service provision. It is indeed a surprise, and the thought here is that, you know, we don't really expect this to be there because it's not that much of a change from previously, but there are 2 places where people are faltering. One is special processes, it's 8.5.1F, and then 8.5.1G, actions to prevent human error. So be cautious, take a look at that. And then, of course, internal auditor competency shows up as both a top minor, also it's in the total, and a top major. We'll talk about that again. And folks, I am going to move forward with the idea that, you know, we'll focus on the major non-conformances. So a point I want to make, and interestingly enough, that you see this color here being added in to 8516. This 8516 is got a yellow cover. Look at the legend in the bottom, NC not in the top 10 based on the new data. The new data knocks this 8.5.1.6 out of the top 10, and let's understand how it's been replaced. Folks, take this time to write down any questions you may have. I will stay and answer all the questions at the very end of the webinar. Every now and then, I'm going to pause to give you a chance to write questions. So, as I was mentioning to you, 8516 got knocked off, and then when we look at the data, and this data, by the way, is the top 10 minors, special characteristics have been added in. special characteristics, you know, has replaced the 8516 in the top 10 minors. So folks, that's what the time we have allotted to the minor non-conformance. Let's spend the rest of this time looking at the major non-conformances. Couple of points to be made. So here is the Pareto. It's actually the total information on the top major non-conformances. There's 133 majors in 188 audits. Now, as I mentioned to you, this is what we want to avoid. Minor and NCs expect you're going to get minor non-conformances, but folks, if we do a good job, there should be no major non-conformances, because major non-conformances are a showstopper and will require you to get another, at least a partial audit. And as I mentioned to you, we're almost getting one major non-conformance per audit. So it behooves us then to take a good look at these major NCs. All right. So what are we saying here? We're going to focus again on the vital few. The vital few in this analysis works out quite well, and it's 29 of the major non-conformances. So we have 35 on one end and 29. So what does that add up to? 29 plus 35. 64 or something, right? All right, 64. You guys can check my math as we all use calculators now. I can't check anymore in my head. But so this would tell us, okay, there's 64 non-conformances to pay attention to. Not really, that's not the case. There's doubles in both the total list and the major list we'll subtract, which I'll talk to you about. So a couple of points I want to make to you is about 3 of them, excuse me, 3 of the majors are occurring 1 out of 20 non-conformances. See that 5%? And then when we bottom out, 2% or 1 out of 50 majors are in the bottom here. I'll show you the statistics later. So at the end of the day, you know, there is 29 major non-conformances I'm going to ask you to put on your list. What is the observation here when we look at the distribution by clause number? This is actually top 80%. So 2 typos we want to catch, folks. The majority of the non-majors are in 7.0, 8.0, and 9.0. Okay, 7.0 with all the support processes, 8.0 being in the the old product realization, 9.0 pretty much internal audits and management review, and then it trails off. All right. So just to take another, let me just say this again. This is the distribution and the frequency. This is by the number. Okay, 2 different things. And you know, you can see that clauses 6, 5, and 10 are very underrepresented, especially when you see what the NCs are all about. Okay, so really, the dominant ones are 8.0, 9.0, 4.0, and 7.0 by the number of clauses appearing in the top 10. Here's a list going from customer-specific requirements all the way to measurement traceability. All right, and we'll do the analysis as we did before. I mentioned to you earlier that only ISO 9001 only showed up twice. How does that show up in the major non-conformances? Well, quite a different story. When we look at this and you look at the yellowed ones here, you can see that it's not at the very top because it's showing up in the second half in terms of frequency. ISO 9001 is showing up maybe not a 50% of the time, maybe with 40 or 40 or 35% of the time. And again, that's what we would expect. ISO 9001 2015 is a major change. But of course, IATF 16949 represents even more change. And just to tell you that when we did our gap analysis, we did find, though, a number of non-conformances as repeating from ISO 9001 1994 or ISO TS 16949. What we show in green are those. Again, 7.2 competence, the internal audit. I take that back. Now that I've spent some time imagining, looking at this, internal audit has substantially changed, but infrastructure has not changed that much. So why are these two that really haven't changed from ISO 9001 1994 or ISO TS 16949 getting majors? Well, as we said, that's what we're finding is the original system people have implemented are not strong enough, is what we find in the gap analysis. All right. So this then is the list of the 35 non-conformances from the total, and this is the 29 from the majors. And as we said, you add them together and there's 64, but really you have to subtract the common ones between the two. When you subtract the common ones between the two, it comes to a list of 56. Folks, keep these 56 non-conformances in mind. These are the 56 I am asking Omnexus internal auditors, as we do the internal audits for our customers, to focus in on. And I'm asking you, the listener, who's in charge of your implementation, to keep this in mind as you do your gap analysis and when you do your internal audits. Folks, let me now pause again and give you a chance to write questions. All right, folks, we will continue on then. And where I left off is by telling you there are 56 non-conformances. It behooves us to put this into our checklist to make sure both in the gap and then in the internal audit, your final internal audit that you're going to submit to your registrar, is in good shape. So when we looked at the top 10 in the first 181 audits, which is from April, this is the list we got. Folks, this means by the legend on the bottom, 4 out of the 10 dropped off the top 10 when we added, when we looked at the 3,000 some audits as of August 2017, the 4 switched out and contingency plans got added in. The non-conformity and corrective action from ISO got added in. Problem solving got added in, and control of production and service provision got added in. We also saw several of these as also one of our top 10 minors. So one of the good news, though, is, folks, if you had taken the 56 that we have told you to, all of these 4 were in the top 56. All right. So they're going to shift a little bit here, a little bit there, based on the data in terms of companies that come forward. But the 56 that we told you to focus on is a good list to have. All right. Let me now spend some time. As I told you, one of the comments that were made is that you wanted a little bit more help, and I thought the right place to add help is in this area. The first item here is internal auditor competency in IATF 16949. So, folks, what do we know? Well, there is the auditors need to know the automotive process approach for auditing, including risk-based thinking. They need to know CSRs. They need to know the IATF and ISO 9001. They need to, I'm going to go on, but it's 723 A through E. Your bottom line, your auditors need to be trained in these internal auditor competencies. Not only system auditors, but there are even more requirements for product auditors and process auditors. And if you don't, you might end up getting a major non-conformance for this. All right. Please do ask me questions. If you have more questions on this, I'm going to go on next to the total productive maintenance. You know, when I first wrote the intro to this webinar, I actually did that a few weeks ago. I did it in the US. And I said, you know, I'm surprised total productive maintenance is a non-conformance. It tells you how easily we can slip out of our mind. Total productive maintenance, indeed, when Omnex we looked at the data from our gap analysis, on 80% of our gap analysis, we gave non-conformances for TPM, total productive maintenance. So what, you know, since I've done a number of those audits myself, the places I'm giving non-conformances are the system shall include applicable CSRs. There are CSRs on total productive maintenance that people are missing. Documented maintenance objectives are missing, plus a regular review, plan and objectives. And if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in here we'll see that maintenance needs to be in the management review, right? Now, I'm surprised I don't, it just says regular review, but it is one of the inputs into the management review. All right. I also saw some of our customers, some of the companies, we gave the idea of periodic overhaul. In fact, it came up as a question that some companies said we don't do periodic overhauls. But this is the idea. What I'm telling my customers to do, you know how you're tracking your capability levels? You know, that's one of the requirements, that you track your capability levels from PPAP. If you see the capability levels are deteriorating, that's a good machine to send out for overhaul. All right, so that covers 851.5. Next is contingency plans. Contingency plans, folks, I counted 8 new shalls here. Contingency plans have changed in a big way. So here, let me just give you a few things. Identify and evaluate internal and external risks to all manufacturing processes and infrastructure equipment. Define the plan according to risk and impact to the customer. Risk and impact to the customer. The number of different events have been expanded, which is C. I'm just going to jump fast forward. You need to do a contingency plan review once a year at a minimum, and it needs to include top management. It needs to be part of this drill. And then you need to document it and then update your contingency plan based on this. All right, contingency planning. It's a big change, and one of the majors that have been given out. Next, in ISO 9001, we do see non-conformity and corrective action. All right, I'm doing 8D. How could ISO 9001 of all standards influence me? Anyway, some of you may think like that, and I think like that. When we go back and check it, 10.2.1B3, all right? 10.2.1B3, determining if similar nonconformities exist or could potentially occur, is one of the things you have to do when you evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause. When you look at the cause, you have to look at that, any similar nonconformities. That's a good place where we give nonconformities. The other one is to update risks and opportunities determined during planning. That's 6.1. You need to go back and update the risks and opportunities if necessary. And then lastly, make changes to the quality management system. All the different changes from 10.2.1. Next, we have the 6.121 risk analysis. This was added by the IATF to the existing 6.1, which is planning risk, as Omnex talks about it. The planning risk is the risk of not meeting objectives. To that, they added quality risk. What did they add? That the organization should include risk analysis at a minimum, lessons learned from recalls, product audits, field returns, repairs, complaints, scrap, and rework. All of these may not apply to you, but you have to take all those that apply to you and use the lessons learned in updating and doing a risk analysis. All right. So becoming a major, in companies. Let's move on then to the second part of problem solving, which is in the IATF. What has changed here? Number one, the scope has changed. It's not, you need to make sure you have, if you're using the 8D methodology, not a problem. If you're disciplined problem solving, you can use it for new product development, manufacturing issues, field failures, audit findings. The standard does give you an option of picking a different approach or type, but make sure your scope of your process procedure covers these issues. Next, what do we have? I have more to just tell you on that. The root cause methodology that you do, you need to have analysis, and let's say we do a three-legged 5Y. You need to show the analysis and the results of these analysis. And then update, we go to 10.2.3F, review and update appropriately the FMEAs. It says PFMEA and control plan, but think DFMEA and PFMEA control plans and so on. All right. So also be careful about CSRs, customer specific requirements, when we look at this. For example, we know Ford has a requirement for that you have to do the report. Let me just sort of read out of the so delivering an 8D beginning with a symptom and an emergency response action, D0, through interim containment action. So you have to do that, I believe, in 24 hours. And then within 48 hours, you have to notify the Ford plan and shall notify Ford service. Okay, by the Ford plan, the organization should also notify Ford service if the product quality issue is suspected of affecting any service requirements. And within 15 calendar days, go back and look at the CSRs. There are CSRs that affect it. And what do we have? We also, General Motors has some CSRs. When you go back and look at the GM CSRs, and they say tracking of issues, you need to track all issues through closure, a daily review of issues by a multidisciplinary team, and so on and so on. So all added together, people are getting major non-conformances in this area. Next, we move on to CSRs. And the biggest thing here, folks, the 432 scope is not just for subscribing customers, it's for your automotive business. A perfect example they give in the US is where Nissan is not asking for IATF 16949, but Nissan is if they're in your automotive business, then you need to consider their CSRs. All right. So the key word is if they're in the automotive business. All right. I do believe that's where people are having an issue with that, and then they're not including it in their matrix in the quality manual 7511. Let's move on. Next, we have the 851, which is an ISO, and it's an ISO requirement, and really this control of production and service provision should not be such a big deal. But folks, I'm going too fast here. Maybe you have questions already in your mind. Let me pause and give you a chance to write down questions you've had for the first 7, and I'll finish the last 3. And I believe I'm still going to have some time for questions. Folks, I'm going to continue then. So let's look at the last three here in our top 10 list. The first one, the eighth one, is the control of production service provision. This is one I did not expect us to have, non-conformances. Really, the delta one here is the G requirement, implementation of actions to prevent human error. But I do believe many people are also stumbling on the validation and periodic revalidation of the special processes, which is F. So do take a good look at those two. And on the end of the day, the majors may be resulting from a lack of process control on the shop floor. All right. Next, we have product safety. The comment made by the AIAG in their one of the conferences on product safety was that many people are looking at regulatory and statutory sort of product safety requirements, and they're not looking and asking the question, what function does my product play, and is this part of the car that affects the safety of the car? Now, folks, I know ISO 26262 and ASIL levels are not so well known in India, but if you did have a product with ASIL level, which is the automotive safety integrity level, automatically you have a part in the bill of materials that affects product safety. Another way you would know you have a product with product safety, other than knowing the function of the product, is that the DFMEA or the PFMEA has 9s and 10s. All right. So this lack of analysis and the lack of looking at the product functions is resulting in this major non-conformance. The last item here is on the management review inputs, supplemental, and there have been many different changes here. So let's look at that. Number one on the list is process effectiveness and efficiency. Not all auditors, but I do know auditors who are giving non-conformances if you don't have for each of your processes effectiveness and efficiency measures. I myself think it's a little too much, but you know what? If you go right by the standard does say you need to have efficiency and effectiveness. All right. So you need to have both of those covered, and then you have to cover that in the management review. You need to cover the assessment of manufacturing feasibility in the management review, maintenance objectives and management review, warranty performance, potential field failures. Potential field failures were there, but they want you to cover the potential field failures that comes from risk analysis, such as a FMEA. So in your FMEA, you're supposed to be looking at what kind of potential, the effect of the FMEA, as one of those effects is field failures. And the last item is actual field failures and the effect on safety or the environment. Folks, so that's what we have as of, this is the top 10 that we should be cautious of. But really, as we mentioned to you, we need to think about the top 56. Folks, we have over 30 questions now. What we'll do is we'll summarize these, what we wanted to talk to you about, and then we'll take your questions. Number one, these third-party audit results have been presented to us at a very opportune time. Why? Many of you are getting ready for your third-party audits in October. I do know we're getting contacted in the US with many people just starting. and the same is happening in India, our India office tells us. So you can start using these 56 non-conformances, not just for your internal audit, but you can also use it in your gap analysis. Don't forget, the biggest single line of defense is a document review. Don't wait for your third-party registrar to catch you for your document review. You need to do a thorough shall review for both your level 1 and level 2. And then, do the gap analysis. Take a look at the 56 NCs. For those of you who are taking Omnexus training, in fact, next week I'm doing a webinar. The second part of this is a webinar on interpretations. And we're going to share with you a checklist that we have prepared for you that includes the right interpretations and also includes the asterisks of these 56 NCs, so you can use it as you do your gap analysis. All right, what shall we continue saying? Third-party audits reveal that 5.0 leadership, planning, and risk-based thinking, not the 6.1.2, which is more of the IATF risk analysis from a product quality viewpoint, but the planning quality are not getting non-conformances that we expected. Or maybe the automotive organizations are doing a good job putting it in place. Third, we also know there's a lot of confusion in the supply base on second-party audits. Ford has come out very clearly. I don't believe it's there. It's in the latest. I'll share this with you next week, that you have to use MAM SQR as a minimum for your second-party audits. GM has come out very clearly saying they want the supply base to go to IATF 6949. In fact, let me just see if we can get the GM one more than the Ford one. It's some of our customers. Well, maybe GM is not as much as a force as Ford, in India, but both. Okay, it's you'll have to look at second party. Not actually, you have to look at second party audits. All right, so a lot of confusion in the automotive supply base. There will be a sanction interpretation that should clear up this confusion. What is it that we can say? Overall, the automotive scheme is working well. There has been a big change in both ISO 9001 and IATF. And it is indeed a wake-up call. I hope this serves as a wake-up call for everybody here in the supply base. And let me just say this. For those of you listening in the quality field, this is the biggest change. As you may or may not know, I did the first worldwide witness audit for QS 9000, and I also helped Ford Motor Company when we transitioned from Q101 to QS 9000 many, many moons ago. So this change is the biggest change since QS 9000. And quality directors, quality VPs, quality managers listening in need to use this opportunity to rethink your management systems, get the budgets in place to really prepare yourself for the next 20 years. And really going into web-based software, based processes is really some of the things in terms of moving towards digitalization is part of the job ahead. So very exciting times for all of us. A lot of work to do, but this is also a chance for you to get the importance inside the organization, get the help inside the organization to make the change. Folks, I'm going to take on questions. Before I take on questions, I'm going to pause here again to give you a chance to write down anything more you may have. Folks, we're going to take some of the questions that you may have. Folks, a couple of questions, common questions. Let me get this out of the way. Is about getting this the slides and or a recording. We'll be happy to provide that for you to help you on your registration towards IATF 16949. All right. Looking at some of the questions, I'm not repeating some of these questions because it's not making as much sense. You know, I had a question on how do you do risk assessment. Let me just say this, that very simply said, risk is always severity times occurrence. The severity may be expressed as impact, but any which way you look at it, it's always severity times occurrence. Soon as you put controls in place, you can take it as severity, occurrence, and detection, all right? But so you need to have, the standard does not require you to use any kind of a certain methodology. You are free, you can do a high, medium, low, but you need to have risk assessment in place, or you might use an FMEA, all right? Or something partially like an FMEA. Let me go to the other questions here. All right, let me go on. For which clause gets major NC? So this was asked by a viewer, a listener. You know, I have already provided to you the top 10 NCs. In fact, I've given you a list of the top 29 major non-conformances. The top 29, there are 56 non-conformances you need to be careful about. Okay, let me go on. I am not understanding some of these questions, how to correlate process approach record. Do you know what that means?
It's asking about the process interaction.
Oh, process approach. You know, so but this is a 4.4 question, 441. Yeah. So very important, because I don't exactly understand this question. You need to have sequence and interaction, right? The standard does not say what to do, but of course at Omnex we'll tell you, you know, common tool to use is a process map. Here are some suggestions on the process map. The process map needs to show both the site and the remote location processes, all right? So it needs to show how those two link together. You also need to show your outsourced processes need to be there. And Suresh, anything else I'm missing here?
The remote location, the linkage to that is very important.
Yeah, very important for the site and remote location processes, and you indicate which ones are the site, which ones are the remote location. So you need to really have what we call an enterprise process map that shows how the entire enterprise works. What else can we say? You know, make sure it's not too complicated. You can't show every link there. If you show all the links, it'll become like spaghetti. So you can show, you know, as many links as it makes sense for inside the company. Explain that to your auditor so you don't get a non-conformance. And we typically say somewhere between 16 to 20, 25 different key processes need to be in your process map. I hope that helps. Oh, do we need to capture and address for suppliers or major? Do we need to capture and address for suppliers of major auto CSR? I don't, again, you have to, if you are a sub-supplier, I know one of my customers that supplies glass has about 80 or 90 automotive business, right? I feel badly for them, but right now as it stands, they need to cover all of them. Of course, start out by focusing on your OEMs, all right? Talk to your third-party registrar to see if you can work something out if you have that many. But if you have 15, 20, it's very doable. It's not very difficult to do. You should be able to do it. All right, of course, we address how to create that matrix in the Omnex 4th day of our internal auditor course.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Let me move on. If we don't have special processes, can we add that as an exclusion? Yes, you can add that as an exclusion or it's not applicable, all right? If you don't have special processes, you don't have special processes. But what is the definition of a special process? The output
cannot be verified
by
the subsequent
where?
by the subsequent activities,
Yeah.
wherein the resulting output becomes.
Say it out loud. Go ahead.
The subsequent processes where we cannot be able to measure the resulting output, and the product can be tested only after the output is being put in use.
For example, heat treating, right?
Yeah, quite so.
The only way you can check it, though, folks, different technologies are coming to, these days, where you can actually check many things now, but where you have to cut the part to find out the quality, you think of as a special process. Welding, soldering. But there's also a number of other processes that could be special processes. All right. What are the actual observations? What are the actual observations? I think you may have typed this at a time I was covering something, so you'll need to re-enter that question for me to make sense out of it. Is there any special requirements for internal auditor qualifications? Absolutely, sir. You need to go look at 7.2.3. 7.2.3, A through E, is competency requirements for internal auditors. Product auditors have additional requirements. Process auditors have additional requirements. And then don't forget, in your process, you have to identify a minimum number of audits that your auditors will do, and then what kind of additional competency or training you will provide based on changes like product technology, process technology, or the standards change or the CSRs change. Okay, I hope that helps. How do you do gap analysis? One of the things, when you ask a question like that, just says, okay, you do need to come and take the training on internal auditor training. You can do a gap analysis based on getting trained as an internal auditor. If you're one of those who get our checklist, you can use our checklist to do your internal audit. I am so sorry. It is a little late for me to maximize my screen. We did not notice that you were reading both the items on the screen. Big apologies here from me. How do we get the 56 non-conformances? All right, you are going to get that list. That list will be there in the recording, and it'll be there in the PDF that we send you. Let me move on. How do we make internal auditors competent for all the risk, regulatory? Okay. How do folks wrap their minds around it all these days? Aha, my old friend Rod here. Hi, Rod. You're up very early for this webinar. Thank you for joining in. It's going to be quite tough, especially in India, to identify, all the different, global regulatory requirements, but that's what the standard is asking for. They ask you to ensure your supplier, if the supplier is from Chennai and they're shipping, they have to, or from Bombay or where, or Pune or Delhi, that they meet all the regulatory and statutory requirements of the state and also the country. Okay, and that's an onus. Folks, I found that you were not able to hear me. Luckily, we have two machines running here, and I hope you're able to hear me now. So I was in the middle of talking about the, getting internal auditors competent for the risk. While I think you all heard me. Let me just continue on. Automotive customers themselves are conducting process audits at suppliers, okay, and confirming the compliance to systems implemented. People who follow are getting the feeling that IATF is not much important. Our auto customer is going to give, are you talking about the BIQS? I think you may be talking about the BIQS audits that GM is doing. It's not that IATF 16949 is not important. It's very important, but BIQS also needs to be done. I do have the top 10 failures in BIQS audits if somebody is interested. Rod, I'm looking at this contingency plan and, oh, the remote site and location. That's what RSL stands for. Absolutely. The contingency plan is not just in the manufacturing site. You have to make sure you think about the contingency plan also at the remote site and location. Yeah, very good point. You know, when you do get my presentation, you actually will also get my notes, the notes that we made for you. So let me continue on. Mr. Dave, make sure you send an email in terms of how you signed up. And we are trying our best to help the industry in general. So we're very happy to share this with you. So do send us an inquiry and we will get that to you. So Arvind, in terms of talking about all the requirements for contingency plans, I covered a lot of it, but you really need to go back and look at contingency planning, the clause of contingency planning, and at least understand at a minimum what the shalls are. And of course, you'll have to design a process for yourself, coming up with a plan, you know, and then of course updating the plan and then putting the plan into use or into conducting a trial run and then updating it. All right, it'll be very tough for me to cover that again with the time allotted. Is the 8D response timeline specified in the new standard? Absolutely mentioned in the new standard. One of the things I didn't mention is also don't forget the Ford manufacturing system assessment, and the Ford Q1 also has requirements that we have to adhere to. Is there any special risk analysis format given in IATF 16949? No, there is no specific format. Can you share your webinar details with check so I can share it with, okay? Contingency, should the contingency plan be part of the management review? You know, you can include that, but it's not a requirement. Let me quickly check that for you while I say that, okay? I mean, the yearly review of contingency planning, I don't recall that being a part of the management review. Take a look at the ISO 9001 also. I'm fairly certain contingency planning is not there. How about competency of second-party auditors? Absolutely. Competency of second-party auditors is a must. You need to make sure they, if I remember off the top of my head, you need to have all the competencies of the internal auditor, plus you need to have the competencies in terms of FEMAs and control plans. Very specifically, FEMAs and control, applicable manufacturing processes, including FEMAs and control plans. Folks, I have at least another 50 questions, so I'm just going to pick and choose a few more. Prabhuram has asked the question, why aren't there no more non-conformances in planning and risk assessment? You know, it's a very, very good question, Prabhuram, but you know, I'm also kind of surprised. I think a little bit, maybe there's more of a focus in automotive, but I did see planning and risk assessment getting non-conformances, but the bigger focus is on the IATF part of it that I did see. General Motors BIQS. BIQS is an additional requirement that you need to get in addition to GM CSRs. The 6123, I may have said simulation, but all I meant by that was you'll have to do a dry run and simulate, one of these risk situations so that you can do like a emergency drill, you will do a contingency planning drill. Is it mandatory to have documented evidences of these competencies? Absolutely true. You need to have documented evidence that your product auditors are also competent in all the internal auditor requirements, plus the additional requirements in 723. I do apologize. I hear some lost audio. Hopefully we have fixed that. So I'll close with this last comment. So last two. Is there any specific guidelines on efficiency and effectiveness for project groups? Now I'll say this again. It is not a process is not a function. All right. So let's say your project management process. Okay. Is there any specific guidelines on efficiency and effectiveness other than effectiveness measures the process itself, and efficiency looks at how well you use resources in that process. All right. An example I oftentimes give is for a new product development process, effectiveness measure could be on time, or effectiveness measure could be, number of PPMs after launch. That's the effectiveness of the new product development process. Yeah, the resource use, in terms of manpower use, or budget would be a efficiency measure. Last question here. My FMEAs are all 2s or 3s, minimum 2s or 3s. That itself worries me. Okay, so that itself is a flag that just went off, right? It tells me maybe there's a problem in your FMEAs. There should be, unless you are perfect, you should not have just 2s and 3s. So go back and take another look at what you're doing for your FMEAs. Folks, with that, let me close and thank you very much for being a part of this webinar. We may open up the webinar I'm doing next week, which is a part 2 of this, or we may run a specific session just for India customers. And so we're doing that very much to make sure our customers have, and all of you, we'll be happy to help all of you. Folks, thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you on other sessions. You're always welcome to all the different webinars. We're doing webinars almost every month. Thank you all also. Bye-bye now, folks.